Are you tired of spending your time and money chasing strategy after strategy only to discover what worked 10, 5, or even 2 years ago is not working now? Things shift fast in the online space, and if you're not keeping up, you're getting left behind. It's time for something different. Welcome to the Marketing, Media, and Money Podcast, where every single episode will be jam-packed with proven, profitable strategies, behind-the-scenes secrets, and what's working now resources from industry experts and global influencers to help you scale your business, shorten your learning curve, and stand out in a crowded, noisy marketplace. And now, your host, award-winning marketing and media strategist, and international speaker, Patty Farmer.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Marketing, Media, and Money Podcast. I'm your host, Patty Farmer, and I'm looking forward to really introducing you and sharing another industry expert with you. And I am excited about our guest today, and I know you will be too. So let me tell you a little bit about her. So Lisbeth Tanz is a nonfiction book ghostwriter, editor, and author coach who works with coaches, speakers, and entrepreneurs who have a transformational message. Lisbeth's passion is helping her clients see themselves through her eyes and encouraging them to reveal those authentic truths and compelling stories that will move, inspire, and enlighten their audiences. She guides authors striving to make a positive difference in the world by taking them from idea to finished manuscript using her proven book planning and writing framework. Many of her clients have reached the #1 best-selling on Amazon in their category, as well as received prestigious book awards. So, Lisbeth, I am so excited to have you on the call today.
Thank you, Patty. I am so excited to be here, and wow, I'm impressed with me after you read that.
I know, isn't that funny? Like sometimes we're like, oh, that's kind of great marketing. But I have to tell you what, in the time that I have known you, you have lived up to all that and more. And I have to say that everybody that knows you loves you. I mean, nobody just says, oh, yes, she's amazing. It's like they just really go on and on and on. And like, you're just so darn cute too, right? So I have to say, I'm really excited that you're here because I have really been looking forward to having you on the show.
Well, thank you, Patty, for saying that. And, right back at you. I don't want to turn this into a love fest, but it's the same way when I mentioned that, oh yeah, I'm going to be working with Patty Farmer. And they're like, oh, the Patty Farmer?
Uh-oh, somebody's heard the story. That's funny. So let's kind of get started here. But you know what? Here is the thing. I know that we never really wake up and say, you know what, this is what I want to do with my life. What really happens is we have this meandering road, right, that kind of leads us to it. And whether it's from a roadblock or some type of hiccup or maybe an aha moment that really gets us to the place where we are doing what we know that we're passionate about and what our purpose is in life. And so I really always love to hear that story really from everyone. Is like, you know what, you're amazing. How did you get here? So can you share with us a little about that?
I can. I will say that as a child, I always wanted to be a writer. And what no one told me was that I could be a writer and not have to be a journalist. So I started down the journalism path and realized very quickly that was not the area that I wanted to work in. Journalism is great and I have done it, but it wasn't my passion. So I ended up with a psych degree, which meant I could go nowhere. And I had to go to graduate school. So instead, I got married and had a baby and ended up in market research, which sort of tied in with psychology. I moved into sales, which for an introvert was a challenge most of the time, but I was really good at it, which is why I stuck with it for 15 years. And then one day I was done and I quit. And that was probably the best thing I could have done. Now, this was back in late 2001. So we'd just gone through 9/11. There was still all that emotional turmoil in the country. And I told my then husband, it's like, I'm done. So we moved into 2002. I freelanced for a year for one of my clients, a notable client down there in Dallas that I can't name. And did that for a year. And then thankfully that contract ended. Took care of my dad after my mom died for a few years. Took coaching classes at Coach U. And in 2005, opened up my first business, The Hired Pen. And for that, I wrote lots and lots of articles. It's where I honed my ghostwriting ability and really enjoyed it. Was an editor for one of our local newspapers here, and which was a lot of fun. I met a lot of different people, worked in a ton of different industries, but also started working on books. I did all of that for a number of years. I wrote websites, I did content, and I did a lot of different types of writing. But in 2016, I was kind of done. I felt like I was being a Jill of all trades and wasn't really good at anything. That wasn't true, but it was how I was feeling at the time. And so I actually started looking for a job and started considering that I needed to find a job that I could take my dog Katie with me, because Katie had never not known me to be at home. She'd been with me since 2002, and I didn't want to leave her at home because that would have been confusing for her, and the cats would have made fun of her. So I started looking for a job and got a little ways down the road, and then she suddenly died in July of that year, and I was devastated because I didn't expect it. She had gotten a fairly clean bill of health from the vet not that long before. And one day she was fine, the next day she wasn't. And I stopped looking for a job and I stepped back and said, I really need to figure out what I want to do, because I can't even think about working for somebody else right now. And I'm probably unemployable anyway, but it just seemed like a good idea to look for a job at the time. So in 2017, I launched Fuzzy Dog, and which of course is named after Katie. She was Fuzzy Girl, but I just couldn't see naming my business Fuzzy Girl. That just seemed weird. So I became Fuzzy Dog, which of course tells you nothing about what I do, but it makes people smile and they want to know what I do. And some people mistakenly guess that I'm a dog trainer or a dog groomer. But when I did that relaunch of my business, I also gave away all of those other pieces. I no longer write content. I no longer write websites. I only work on books. So I either write books, I edit books, or I coach authors. And to say that finally aligning myself was the best thing I could have done, well, that's true. It was the best thing I could have done for myself. And I probably wouldn't have done it if Katie hadn't died. And as sad as it makes me feel that she's not here, she really was the catalyst for moving me into a different direction. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
There you go. And I have to say that even though losing Katie is a very sad story, I have to tell you, I have two, well, they're not really puppies anymore, but they're Shih Tzus, so they're small. I have to tell you, they were the first pets I've ever had. Like, I had 6 daughters, and I raised my kids, and I never really had any animals. We lived in Las Vegas in a city. And when I grew up, and I got married again, the second time I told my husband, I said, I would really love to have a dog. And he's like, really? And I said, yes, I'm working from home now instead of in the office. And I need a reason to get up from my computer. And so I have Cooper and Carly. And I have to tell you, I didn't really get it before, but I get it now. I can't imagine my life without them. And they are such an important part of my life. And they're kind of like my mascots for my business and everything. And so I totally get it. And I know that when I first met you, I was really wondering, why is the name of your business called Fuzzy Dog? But I have to tell you, I totally get it now. And I think there are a lot of people out there who really love their animals. And I'm sure they're out there and they get it too. And I'm sure we're going to hear about it too in the notes. So I think that is absolutely true. But here's one of the things that I think is also interesting is when I was really kind of like looking at information about you, like I knew what you did. And, you know, obviously you're a columnist for the Marketing, Media, and Money magazine, our sister kind of publication. But not only that, it was like, it's how you write. I mean, like for you just saying you don't write content anymore, you're amazing at it. But here's what I found interesting is a few people have told me that you're known as the Author Alchemist.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is just so interesting. So how did you get known as that? Like, what kind of brought that on? Because I think that's really an interesting title.
Oh, well, thank you. I mean, it's I titled myself that, but it was really in looking at how I work with my authors and where they start to where they finish when they're working on their books is such a growth period. Even if you've written books before, there's always something new to learn about the book writing process and about yourself as you go through the book writing process. And a lot of what I help authors realize is that there's no cookie cutter approach to writing a book. That yes, there are formulas out there, but everyone is an individual. And much like running a small business, you have to find your own groove. And trying to fit into someone else's way of doing something, if that doesn't fit for you, you will never, ever write your book. And that's really where that came from. And to have authors really light up when they realize that they can do this their way within certain constrictions. I mean, the books have certain things that they need to be readable, but you don't have to chain yourself to a desk and write 8 hours a day. I don't even do that because I would go crazy, and I really want people to invest their energy and their love and their passion in their books and feel good about what it is that they're putting out. And so I'm also a big fan of take as long as you need to write your book. Don't try to constrain yourself into a time frame because somebody else is telling you that's what you have to do. Because I've seen some pretty awful books that were written in a very short time frame, when if the author had taken a longer time to tease out their ideas and to really explain and demonstrate what it is that they do and what they're passionate about, the book could have been so much better. And nothing is worse than having someone say, and I've had people say this, oh, I wrote a book, but I don't tell anybody and I don't have it on Amazon and I don't want anyone really to know that I wrote it. That to me is so sad.
You know, it's really kind of a funny story, but I was at an event in Miami not very long ago with a multi-millionaire having this tremendous conference that was like at the Miami Stadium. Like that's how big it was, right?
Yikes. Wow.
And so he has this, bestseller on Wall Street and, the US Times or whatever it's called. Anyway, it was so funny because he was sharing the story about how his coach had told him that he needed to write a book. But the thing that makes me laugh was that after he wrote the book, like he locked himself in the room for a weekend and said, told his wife, I'm not coming out till I write the book. So he did. And what he said was, after he published the book, people came up to him and said, well, do you know on page this and that? And, started like correcting the book, right?
Ouch.
And he said, I said it was a bestseller. I didn't say it was a best written. I laughed so hard.
Yes.
Just because he was making fun, right? And stuff though. But I was like, to your point, had he sent it to an editor, which he probably did or edited himself, I don't know. But I mean, really, honestly, when I was thinking about it, he was kind of really in his story was about like, get over yourself, right? And I totally get it because I know that when I do the magazine, editing is painful. And one of the things that early on, when, it's been a couple of years now, but early on, what would happen is people would write to me after the magazine was published and they would say things to me like, you know what, Patty, on page 17, there's a semicolon and that should really have been a period, or there's a this and it should have been a that. And I would be crushed. Like, how did I not catch that? And we sent it to an editor and all this kind of stuff. And it took me a little while to to realize that if that's what they need to do to validate themselves, or if they read my whole magazine and what they're focusing on is that, I mean, like, just get past that, right? Let the haters hate, right? But yeah. I do get it though, because I know that of the whole process of the magazine, I have to tell you, the editing process is the toughest part. And I just have to tell you that of every person who writes for my magazine, you're the only person that we never have to edit.
Oh,
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm really happy to hear that, because, that makes me feel, hey, maybe I can write. Maybe this writing gig will work out.
but really, like, when you think about it, because I know for me, like last year, I made the decision that I was going to stop blogging. Like, it was painful for me. Like, I write a magazine, right? I have a magazine, mm-hmm. and that in itself is enough for me. And so to try to do a blog and do it, consistently and this and that, and have to come up with things. Oh my goodness, my blog needs to go out on Tuesday. I just gave myself permission to not do it. And I have to tell you, the grace of doing that has just been wonderful. Now I write when I have something to say, right? Mm-hmm. When I have something valuable, and I make sure that it goes out when it's ready to go out. So I think that planning is just so important in what I do. So I can't even imagine. And I think you know this, Lisbeth, but I have been a part of 5 books. They were all collaborative books, and just writing one chapter in each one of them. Oh, that was just so hard. So I'm always thinking that I'm going to write my solo book, and I've started 2 of them and stuff. And I know they will get done, but I have to tell you, it's going to get done on my time frame. So the whole planning for it and doing all of the things, I think just really, it's kind of like, when people should be planning their social media and everything else. So let's kind of take us through the process a little. This is where you are an absolute expert. So let's kind of talk about what some of that process is about. What should people be doing first? If they're thinking about writing a book, it seems to me that, well, actually, I'm going to ask you another question first, because I think it's important. What are some of the most common reasons why people want to write a book first? And then we can get into what the process is.
Most of the people that I work with, not all, but the majority of them are business owners, and they tend to fall into the coaching, speaking, and entrepreneurial categories. So they have a message that they want to share with a bigger audience. So that's usually the number one reason that anybody writes a book. They want to share their knowledge, their inspiration, the dirt. I have had clients that write a lot of dirt about their families. I don't understand that, but hey, they're paying me to edit their books. Really, it's also looking for credibility, to being able to say, I wrote a book, has a lot of cachet. Even today, with all the books that are on Amazon, which there are millions and millions and millions, it's still a big deal to say, I'm a published author. And
absolutely. Yeah, and I think speakers need to be book. If you're a speaker, you should have a book. And if you have a book, you should be a speaker. But that's just my personal opinion.
Well, I think it's nice to have something at the back of the room, whether you are a business coach that is doing public speaking, or even as a business coach and you are looking to get into media. You want to be put on a podcast. A book is a great way to introduce yourself to different mediums so that you can get yourself out there more. And honestly, the biggest reason that a lot of people write books is just so they can touch more people, because they want to change lives. And I love being part of those books. That's why, I talk about helping people get out that transformational message, because there are so many ways to approach life. There are so many ways to go through life. And sometimes it's hearing just that right message that gets you through it. And I can give you an example of what worked for me. The book Eat, Pray, Love is a novel, first-person kind of nonfiction book. I read that book in 2007. I was in a very unhappy marriage. And reading her book, Elizabeth Gilbert's book, gave me the strength to say, I can do better. I can be better. I can be a better person. He can be a better person. We can be better people apart than together. And that's when I started, making plans that I was going to leave that marriage. That to me was a transformational message that she had in her book. If she could do it, well, so can I. And I had my income was not great. It was kind of a wing and a prayer, and I am going to step off the cliff, but life can be better than it is. And I wasn't born to live this life. And so I want that for other people.
I have to tell you, when then I picture Julia Roberts in that movie,
Mm-hmm.
I could take her out and put you in there and picture it so easy. So easy. I can picture you in as that person in the book. So easy just playing that in my mind. I think it's because you have a beautiful smile and laugh and stuff. And so I can totally like picture it.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. So now let's take us through the process. So like really honestly, if somebody comes to you, right now, I know a lot of times people must come in at all different parts of the journey, right? Either they've already written a book or, like I'm sure there's all types of ways that people come to you. Mm-hmm. But if somebody comes to you, what are some of the very first things? Because, I think sometimes when people come to me and I think about marketing, right? Like, do they even have a plan? So really honestly, take us through what that journey really would look like.
Okay. Really the first thing that when someone comes to me and they have yet to write their book, but this also applies to someone who has written a book, I will still ask these same questions. What's the big idea? What is that thing that you want people to take away from what it is that you're writing? And why are you the person to write it? Sometimes people get a little prickly about that because it's like, well, because, and it's like, wait, give me a break here. I don't know you. So I want to know why you would be the expert to write this particular thing. And there's a series of steps that we'll go through to help them identify if they don't know what their big idea is, or if they have 10, because prolific people have lots and lots of ideas. We'll work to synthesize it down to the top 3 and then to that top 1 that is the book they need to write now. We'll also talk about what type of content they already have. And I don't want to get ahead. I know you wanted to ask about that part, but because a lot of people, if they do blog, if they do a podcast, if they do YouTube videos, often have a tremendous amount of content already that can be repurposed into a book. Now, when I say repurposed, that does mean rewriting to be in a book. Never, ever, ever take a blog and just smush it into book form, because it will just read like, 100 different little stories that will not tie together. But there is a way to do that will make everything flow. So if you have a blog and you've been wanting to write a book, consider looking there first. The other thing is that you need to understand, authors have to understand what job that book is going to do. And I call that give your book a briefcase. And basically what that means is, well, I very rarely work with someone who writes a book just because they want to write a legacy book for their family. That is honorable, and I love that people do that, but that's not why I do what I do. I work with people who truly want their book to work for them, whether it's in the back of the room at speaking engagements, or it gets them noticed on by a reporter that they want to be interviewed in, or they want to try to be an Amazon #1 bestseller so they get more juice from their community, so that their credibility and their respectability and notoriety all increase. Those are all the reasons you have to understand what job is that book going to do for you. And we'll spend a fair amount of time on that because most people don't think about that. I
could see where that would be very, very important.
Yeah. What I don't want people to think is, I'm going to write this book and I'm going to sell 1 million copies, because you probably won't. If you do, awesome. I want to be part of that book. But chances are you won't, but your book will work harder for you in different ways than if you sold 1 million copies. And that's what people don't understand.
I think that's about a lot of things too. Like I know for all the things that I do and for the things my clients do, I feel like sometimes it's really hard for people to understand that not everything is revenue generating as cash. Sometimes it's revenue generating as opportunity.
Yes, absolutely. And because people don't always see that end goal, that's where in having the sales conversation with prospective authors, whether they're asking me about my editing services or can I write the book for them as a ghostwriter, they'll often gulp because they don't realize that those are, while they're different and they cost very different, there's still a cost to that. And I'm not the cheapest editor out there, but I am I am very, very thorough. And that's what I've built my business on. And ghostwriting is the same thing. So if someone comes to me and says, well, I need you to write this, ghostwrite this book for me. And I can give you an example of one of my clients. She actually hired a different ghostwriter for her book and spent a lot of money with that writer and got a book half done that she didn't want. So she came to me and said, can you fix this? So we had lengthy conversations about what she wanted the book to do for her. What is her position? What is the transformation she wants people to get out of reading her book? And what she already had wasn't going to serve any of those purposes, which was really hard to tell her. She hired me.
I bet it was hard for her to receive too. But I
Yes.
think it's important sometimes to have those conversations though, because otherwise people have an expectation that just isn't realistic. And even if you don't like it, hearing it at first, then you have the power to make changes to do what it is that you want it to do, whether it's changing the book or just coming up with new things that you can do with it and, realigning what the goals are that you want it to do. I think that it's not having the conversation that's even more painful later on.
Yes. And she accepted responsibility for the part she played in creating a book that she didn't want. She hired me. I wrote her book. I'm still waiting for her to publish it. She has not published it yet. I'm not sure actually, I do know why she hasn't. So I'm hoping that she will, because it was a really fun project. She's an amazing woman. But, I see my job as an editor and as a ghostwriter is being able to be honest with authors. So if you come to me with a manuscript and you ask me to read it, I will. I do manuscript reviews and I will come back and be honest. And I had to be honest with one of my clients that it wasn't her first draft, but it was the first draft that I saw was awful. And I had to tell her, I gave her back her manuscript and she looked really confused. And I said, look, your book is very angry for understandable reasons. And now you have the opportunity, since you've gotten all of that out of your system, to go back and smooth over the anger and say what you really want people to hear. And it took her about 6 months before she even looked at the book again. She had to really sit with that. She was not happy to hear it. She wasn't angry at me, but she was sad because she really wanted it to be done. And I do hear that a lot from authors after they've written. It's like, oh my gosh, I just want to be done with this. And it's a baby. You have to see it all the way through to delivery. And if you're tired of your book now, before it's finished, then I really want you to think about, is this really the book that you should be writing right now? Because you're going to be talking about this book for the next 2 to 5 years. And if you're bored with it, if you hate the subject matter, then don't go through the publishing process, because you're going to spend a lot of time and energy and money that you may regret.
I think that is so nice that you are, upfront so people really know. Because, I think a lot of times people have this, idea that, oh yeah, I'm just going to write a book and I can write a blog, so I can write a book, or I have this message I want to come out, or I have a story, right? And I think that it isn't always as simple as that. Like, I know that for me, writing is so much harder. I'm a speaker, but even as a speaker, you could tell a story. And I remember when I hired a speaking coach and I, talked about, okay, here's the story I want to tell. And we went through kind of like the same thing, like, well, what is it that you want them to get out of it? And what's the message you want? And literally, I can't even tell you how many times she made me retell it, like rewrite the story. And it wasn't that the story changed. I mean, the story was still the story, but how you tell the story is so important. And it took me a long time, really. I want to say longer than I want to admit, for me to really get it. But it's a process. But I have to tell you, by hiring a professional and going through the process makes it easier the next time, right? And the next story, and the next story. So I really, just like anything else, you're going to shorten your learning curve by hiring a professional. And I have to tell you, I don't think there's very many people that do what you do, really. So I say kudos to you. And I mean what I say when I hear from people about how fabulous you are. Somebody shared with me, I'll just tell you, that somebody shared with me that your superpower is listening between the lines. I was like, oh, I love that. Listening between the lines. I find when I'm networking with people, I'm really good at that. But I have to tell you, to have that as a superpower. So would you agree that that's your superpower, or do you think it's something else?
No. I kind of a funny story. The thing that I have always been able to do is to see people in their greatest potential, even when they can't see it for themselves. So I spent 3 years in this century with a guy who I could see how great he could be, but he was not great and was never going to be great. So being able to turn around and say, okay, well, if I do that with people, why can't I do that with authors? Why can't I do that with the books? Why can't I read what they write and hear what's going on under the surface, which is reading between the lines or listening between the lines? So if I'm interviewing someone, I am absolutely listening, but I'm also listening for those intuitive hits that maybe I need to follow up with this. And maybe I need to ask them more details about that. That's really what I mean by saying I listen between the lines. And it has served me well. It served me well actually in sales too.
I can see that, listening between the lines is really important because no matter what you're doing, sometimes what they say, I don't want to say it's not true. It's their truth at that moment, but it may not actually really be the whole truth. It's just the truth as they see it. I mean, we all have that, right? Within when we tell a story, right? It's through our eyes, through that lens. So sometimes I would think listening between the lines, I mean, it doesn't matter whether it's a discovery call, a strategy session. I mean, whatever the case may be, I could see where that superpower is a great superpower. That is really good. And actually, there's something else that really I think is important is I think that when I had a conversation with you once before, I was talking about, my books and how I'd written all these chapters. And I was like, I just don't know if I have enough content really to write a book. And you said that you already have part of your book written. And you told me that one of the key things, and you called it content sleuthing. And I was like, now that's a good phrase. I was like, content sleuthing. So tell me, really, let's share with the audience, what is that? How do you do it? How do you got that whole thing going on about that? Because I think that is so important. Key is what you told me. So tell me how that affects the book writing process and working with you, really.
Okay. Most people, when they contemplate writing a book, there's two scenarios. One is, I can do that. The other one is, oh my gosh, I don't know how to do that, and I'm terrified even thinking about it. So the person who says it's no problem, it's probably not a problem, but for the person who's terrified of long-form projects, which is what a book is, the easiest way to quell the fear is to say you probably already have a lot of this content in some form. So when I tell people to, put on their little detective hat and get out their magnifying glass and go do some sleuthing, it's to look for every piece of information that they have ever written, speeches they've given, videos they've done, other content that they may have written, any guides or booklets that they may have written, whether it's for this business that they're in or even for something else, and pull all of those pieces together to see what might fit. Now, the key to this, though, is you have to know what road you're traveling in order to fairly assess if what you have is going to fit. So before you do any of that, we have to at least have an idea of what that outline is. And when I say outline, it's not just, a bullet point list. This is going to be a really detailed, this is what we want to do in every chapter kind of outline. Only then can you really go and assess what you have. in a way that will make sense so that you can say, okay, I've got that piece. I've got that piece. I've got that piece, but it needs to be augmented. I need to add more to it in order for it to fit. So then you start plugging in these pieces of content into your outline. And suddenly that big, hairy book that you want to write isn't so hairy, and it's not so big, because now you've gotten your arms around it in a way that says, I can do this.
Oh, that just makes so much sense, really, because the reality is most of us have a lot of content, whether it is social media or blogs, like you said, speeches. There's a lot of content that people really have. I think that seems like it would be a lot easier. If nothing else, if you just collected all that, answering the question of really talking about what message you want to get out there, a lot of that would probably be hidden and be key in there, that just putting all that together. So I really love it. But then even when you do all that, now you've got to plan, and you've got to have a book proposal or not. Like, how important are all these things?
A book proposal, it can be handy if a book proposal typically is used when you're going to a traditional publisher and you're going to have an agent who's going to shop your manuscript around. That's really where book proposals come from. Do you need one if you're self-publishing? You don't, unless you're stuck. And then I'm a big fan of, why don't you use a book proposal kind of as your jumping off point, because it's going to go through all of these things that I've just been talking about. It's where you can really identify the evidence of need. Is your book really needed in the marketplace? Now, I know anyone that's listening to this is going to say, yes, it is. Well, it might not be, not in the way that you're thinking. And using a book proposal is a way to help maybe modify your thinking. You may start down a path and realize, oh, well, this just sounds like everybody else's book. And going through and understanding what the perspective is that you want to quantify through your words, and understanding what else is out there that you're going to be, your book's going to be rubbing shoulders with, you'll understand in a much clearer way how to differentiate your voice from all the other voices that are out there. So when you work on a book proposal, you're looking at things like, what is the book about? Are you the best person to write this book? Who will buy this book? And here's a hint. Everyone is not an audience. There is no book on this planet that appeals to everyone. No book, not even The Secret. So you have to understand who your audience is. And if you don't, that's where you need to start. And how will you get the word out about the book? How are you going to market your book? Even though you are not necessarily thinking about, most people don't think about the marketing of their book when they're starting out, but you have to. It goes back to, what job is this book going to do? So I hope you can see how all these pieces tie together. And, writing a book isn't just that singular function of sitting down, writing an outline, and putting words down on paper. That is only one small piece.
Ooh, that is so good. And I think that is really an important piece too. And then when I think about it too, I think of all that editing. Like, it always comes back to all that editing. And I think the reason why it really does for me is because I think about, I edit the magazine first, and then I send it to an editor. Mm-hmm. And I know, isn't that kind of funny that I edit it first and then I send it to an editor?
No.
But I have to tell you, editing for me is absolutely painful. But I do it for a couple of reasons, because I really want to know what the articles are about, and because I'm looking at it through marketing eyes, right? So how am I going to market it, right? But with that said, when I think about it, the editing process, learning how to do it better, I think would really help. So one of the things I have to say is, while I was, really kind of doing a little sleuthing of my own on your website, I noticed that you have this self-editing for authors guide. And I love that. So I'd like you to tell us a little bit about that, because what I want to know is, would it work for blogs and the magazine and other things as well as books? I mean, is that guide something that could help us in editing and everything that we need to edit it, or is it more geared pretty much just for books?
While it is written for books, editing, the self-editing for authors guide works for anything that's written, because the whole point is just giving you some tips and tricks. Wow, I can't speak today. What you need to look for before you send your book or your blog or whatever piece of content you have to an editor, if you're using an editor. If you're not using an editor for content, then this will help you make your content that much better so that there will be fewer errors, so that you don't get these calls or these emails like you've gotten, Patty, saying, did you know in paragraph 3, there's a typo? Nobody likes to hear that. So the point of me writing this was to help authors understand that they cannot send a first draft to an editor. Because if it goes back to when I was saying that I've talked to authors who were bored with their writing after the first draft, you have to go through your book yourself 2, 3, 4, 5 times. And I hope I didn't just scare somebody, to make sure that the words are what you want. Because you cannot ask an editor, unless it's a developmental editor, which is when I'm brought in at the beginning of a book, or at the point when an author is so frustrated they don't know what to do, which of course is more expensive than the editor at the back end of a book. You want to make sure that the words are saying what you want them to say, that the stories flow the way you want them to flow, that you are making transitions between your chapters and even between paragraphs. So we call it at Fuzzy Dog, we call it the rough draft, which is RUFF. That's your jumping off point. And I really want authors to understand, when you get your rough draft finished, that first ugly rough draft, you should go celebrate, because the majority of people that want to write a book, that start writing a book, never write a book. And that includes me. I have not finished my book. It's a novel, but I still haven't finished it. And so you go congratulate yourself, and then come back and move beyond the rough draft and really start looking at, some of the things that I have in here. Do your ideas flow from paragraph to paragraph and page to page? Or are you jumping around? If you jump around, you're going to lose your reader very quickly, because they're not going to have the patience to get through your book. Do you keep revisiting the same ideas repeatedly? Repetition, if you are teaching something, is key. If you're repeating because you've run out of words, that's not going to fly. Again, you'll lose your readers. Once they read it once and maybe twice, and then they come again around to it on the third pass, they're going to close your book and say, yeah, it's not worth my time. Or do you go off on tangents? I had an author come to me. He had written 4 books in the financial sector. He's not a finance person, but he loves finance. And so he wanted to write books for 20-somethings. So I read his first book, and he went off on all these weird tangents that had nothing to do with the book. And he did not hire me, because I don't think he liked that I said that. They said, you lost me in chapter 2, because you started talking about basketball, which had nothing to do with the topic of checkbooks and, balancing your accounts. And so you need to make sure that you're not going off on too many tangents. Stories are fine. Stories that the reader can relate to, that also relate to your topic, those are great. But if it's just, I want to tell you about my Uncle Harry because he was really cool. Yeah, don't do that. Don't do that.
I love it. And it makes so much sense too. And I love that that'll work on other things. So I think that is fabulous. So Lisbeth, how can my audience connect with you?
Honestly, the easiest place to find me is on my website, which is fuzzydogllc.com. And I've got a bunch of different little things there. You can read about me. You can read about Katie. But you have to figure out where that link is. It's hidden on my site.
I know. I know. I love that. So I have to say that I really love that not only did you come just sharing your brilliance, but you came with a gift as well. So tell us a little bit about the gift that you have for my audience.
Sure. This is actually, it's what I wrote about in one of the editions of the Money
Marketing, Media,
Marketing, Media, and Money. Thank you. See, you know what? It's getting late in the day and my brain goes to mush.
It's a lot of M's.
It is the book proposal template. It's actually in a PDF document, and it gives you all the different pieces of what a book proposal entails, but it is geared toward the person who is self-publishing, who really wants to dive into what it is they want to write about and needs a little bit of guidance. And maybe you don't want to hire me, but you want to know what's got to go in there and what am I going to have to think about for the different pieces of my book, in addition to what is my book going to be about.
Now that's really handy. So between getting that book proposal template and the self-editing for author's guide, man, that's just like a 1-2 punch. So I love that. And that is very generous of you, Lisbeth. And I really, really appreciate it. And now we are at the portion of the show that I love to call #OpenMic. It's literally my version of social karaoke, where I'm going to pass the mic over to you and I'm going to ask you, what is your number one marketing, media, or money strategy?
All right. I don't have to sing this, right?
No.
Good. So, I really believe that it's essential for business owners to review and revise how they market, what media they use, and how they manage their money. So I'm hitting on all cylinders here. It's nice to be on autopilot. It's great to know that things are working the way they're supposed to, but you could be missing opportunities to grow your business if you don't keep looking out at what's there. What that means for me is taking risks and marketing differently, like being a featured columnist on Marketing, Media, and Money magazine to reach different audiences. That was a bit of a stretch for me, but when I saw Patty was doing it, it was like, well, heck yeah, I'm going to try this. I'm going to do this. And I'm really glad I did.
I'm really glad you did too. I'm really glad you did. I mean, that's really a good strategy because I really think that a lot of times people miss it, right? They get so used, automation is a good thing, but they get so used to doing that sometimes they can miss things. So I think that is really, really important and a great strategy for sure. So Lisbeth, thank you so much for joining me today and spending this hour with me. I really appreciate it. Great information. It's really an important topic, and really, there aren't very many of you that do the things that you do and do it so well. So I think it is really important. I really appreciate you being here with me.
Patty, thank you so much for inviting me. As always, talking with you it's always insightful and informative and fun. And I really do appreciate being on your show. Thank you so much. And being part of the magazine.
Thank you. And thank you to the audience for joining us today on the Marketing, Media, Money podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, subscribe, and review the podcast on your favorite listening platform. Make sure to join us in the Facebook group, Marketing, Media, Money podcast, magazine, and live events. We'd love to have you get up close and personal with our guests there as well. And if you're looking for a mastermind that focuses on marketing and media, hit me up for some information on the new Marketing, Media, Money Mastermind that's starting soon. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a phenomenal day. Remember, if your day is not phenomenal, you have the power to change it.
Thank you for joining us today on the Marketing, Media, and Money podcast. To shorten your learning curve even more, make sure to grab your free copy of the Marketing, Media, and Money magazine at www.marketingmediamoney.com. I promise your business will thank you.